Adult Swim's bizarre new animated comedy Smiling Friends is a surprise hit. I think there's a few reasons for the internet's near-viral embrace of this project, like its frenetic pace and rich visual style, but revolving as it does around the pursuit of happiness and fulfillment. There's also a captivating philosophical element at the core of Smiling Friends. And so I want to take a look at the show's first episode from this perspective, and ask the question, what does Smiling Friends tell us about finding meaning and the human condition? And to do this, I'll be looking at a few key moments from the episode through the lens of existential and absurdist philosophy. Don't worry though, I'll keep it simple. Oh, and content warning, there's going to be some brief discussion around suicidal thoughts, so be warned. So, in the pilot episode, we are introduced to the Smiling Friends, an organisation dedicated to making people smile, and we primarily follow two members of this organisation, Pim and Charlie, on their quest to cheer people up. The call comes in that somewhere in the city, a mother wants to put a smile on her son's face, and so the Smiling Friends leap into action. But when they get there, it becomes clear that this show isn't going to be as cheery and light-hearted as it had seemed up to this point, because the guy who needs perking up isn't a little kid, it's a fully grown and suicidally depressed man named Desmond. The rest of the episode sees the joyful Pim and the apathetic Charlie trying to get the job done by taking Desmond to various locations in order to show him the beauty of life, like a family dinner or a theme park, but none of these work. Desmond remains convinced of life's meaninglessness, and the result of this conviction is a severe anguish, and we're shown this explicitly in the following moment.
Are the best parts of life really just finding momentary distractions to keep yourself busy so you don't think about the harsh realities of life for a second? I can ride roller coasters, meet new friends, and spend time with my family all day long. It doesn't change the fact that the sun is just gonna explode, and all this was for nothing.
This gives us an insight into the existential crisis Desmond is having, and it's a pretty big one. It's big enough to send the normally chirpy Pim into a catatonic state of despair, and we'll return to that later, but sticking with Desmond for now, the problem he's grappling with is actually a fairly standard one. It's the starting point for much of the atheistic existentialist tradition, in fact. If we accept the notion that the universe is not the creation of some deity, benevolent or otherwise, and is instead just there, existing and utterly indifferent to us, if we believe that our existence is more or less a cosmic accident, then we sort of have to accept that there isn't any true purpose to our lives, no transcendent meaning. In contrast to the broad Abrahamic notion that we exist to glorify God, for instance, or Buddhist or Gnostic ideas that the purpose of life is to achieve enlightenment, the basic existentialist position is that we simply exist without any real rhyme or reason. One reaction to this position is nihilism, which laments the lack of any true divinely ordained meaning or purpose to existence, and despairs. To oversimplify slightly, for a nihilist, it's not merely that nothing in life has any meaning, it's that meaning itself can't even really exist. Looking at Desmond's monologue then, we might initially think that his words suggest a nihilist viewpoint, but I don't think that's the case, and here's why. Whereas a nihilist is convinced of this essential emptiness, Desmond is open to the possibility that he could be made happy, could find some sort of meaning to his life. He just hasn't experienced anything yet which fits the bill. That's why he's willing to postpone his scheduled meeting with Mr. Smith and Wesson, because he's perfectly able to entertain the logical possibility that something will bring him purpose. In this sense, Desmond's potential suicide actually aligns fairly closely with philosopher Albert Camus' understanding of the phenomenon. Camus wondered if suicide was the only logical response to recognizing the futility and meaninglessness of existence, but reassuringly, Camus also thought there was a better way to go about things. Other existentialist philosophers such as Jean-Paul Sartre had made the argument that despite the lack of any inherent meaning in existence, mankind's quest for purpose in spite of this generated a kind of meaning. Camus sort of agreed, but in his opinion, the meaning generated in the search for meaning wasn't true meaning, it was illusory and transient, and he thought that the solid finality of death eventually dispelled this illusion. Despite this, Camus wasn't a nihilist, and believed that the role of the individual was to continue searching for this temporary, transient sense of meaning in life, in the face of an uncaring and random cosmos, all the while being aware that any semblance of meaning we're able to accrue is nullified by death. That can be quite a hard task, impossible even. That's why Camus referred to facing this dilemma as confronting the absurd, because of the ludicrous difficulty and darkly humorous irony in this mental task, a task that nevertheless must be undertaken in order to achieve a worthwhile existence. Of course, as we see with Desmond, not existing is an option here too. But Camus viewed suicide negatively, thinking it constituted a confession that life isn't worth living, and that confronting the absurdity of existence was too much. This seems to be where Desmond is headed in that episode of Smiling Friends. Without even the illusion of happiness, meaning, or purpose, he's not able to maintain the almost contradictory state of mind which characterizes Camus' Absurd. But here's the thing, we see this change. Following Camus, absurdists theoretically allow for the existence of meaning in life, with the caveat that this meaning isn't anything beyond a mental illusion which helps life seem worth living. As noted above, Desmond seems to share this state of mind, but when the Smiling Friends return to the office, miserable thanks to a failed job, the episode's A and B plots converge, and Pim, Charlie and Desmond come across a horde of bliblies. Weird little pest creatures, don't ask. Desmond, though, uses his revolver to shoot one, and his face lights up. It turns out he loves shooting bliblies, and just like that, everything changes.
That felt good.
In violence and blibly hunting, Desmond finds a purpose, and even though it might seem a perverse or cruel one, it's Camus' position that the corollary of a meaningless universe and the absurdist condition is an utter freedom on the part of the individual. There's no gods or concrete, unassailable ethical frameworks which can impose divine or moral restrictions on what each person can or even should do. So it doesn't matter how twisted or empty we find Desmond's meaning-making to be, it matters what Desmond thinks, and seemingly it works for him. You remember his speech. Desmond knows there's still no inherent meaning in the world, but he's able to hold this and his personal meaning, that is, slaughtering little dudes, simultaneously in his head. That's enough to tip the existential scales away from suicide, and from the absurdist's perspective, that's the key to a happy life. So maybe the Smiling Friends did their jobs after all. But speaking of the Smiling Friends themselves, the flip side of the resolution of Desmond's arc is the non-resolution of Pim's, because as noted above, Pim's driven to doom and gloom as we see him confront the meaninglessness of existence, seemingly for the first time, but this isn't resolved at the episode's end, which, by the way, I respect as a fairly bold artistic choice. The intentional lack of any tidy resolution to this story is jarring, in a good way, and matches the otherwise abrasive aesthetics of the show. But this downer note is also interesting philosophically, because it illustrates the other side of the subjectivity of meaning in an absurdist framework. While people like Desmond can find purpose, or the illusion of purpose in life, what fulfills one person won't necessarily fulfill the next, and clearly the wholesale slaughter of bliblies doesn't bring the same joy for Pim that it does for Desmond. Even when Desmond is cheered up, and Pim's original purpose is thus fulfilled, he doesn't recover. Maybe, the episode suggests, not everyone is able to embrace the absurd, to hold subjective meaning and objective meaninglessness together in their head. That is what Pim's ending suggests, philosophically speaking. Or I should say suggested, because while this was the final fate of this character for a good while, from the 2020 air date of the Smiling Friends pilot until a couple of months ago, it isn't anymore. Adult Swim picked up the pilot and ordered a season, and throughout the rest of these episodes, Pim seems largely back to his optimistic ways. He continues living, continues smiling, and thus it seems he too has confronted the absurd, past this tribulation. And given that he's still working for the Smiling Friends, it seems he's figured out a way to obtain this transient, illusory sense of meaning from helping other people avoid despair, and helping them to find some sort of light within a confusing and uncaring existence. So the show's philosophy isn't groundbreaking or anything, but within the show's pilot I think we see a pretty interesting exploration of absurdism, and moreover it's an exploration which fits perfectly with the downright absurd visuals of Smiling Friends as a whole. Smiling Friends emerges as a project keenly aware of the ridiculous and often vicious nature of our existence, and the fact that sometimes the line between laughter and despair is thinner than we might like. It's a good thing then that the show so effectively embraces the side of laughter. You could probably take these ideas further, but like an episode of Smiling Friends, I think this is a video which would work best if kept to a snappy runtime. I hope this video was enjoyable, and please do let me know below what you thought of my argument. Given the content of Smiling Friends and this video though, I've a nasty feeling this video will end up demonetized, or at the very least artificially limited by YouTube. So if you're feeling generous, I'd really appreciate a like. And a big thanks as always to my patrons on screen now, especially Ian Fifield, and I'll see you all soon.